Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. So, today we're tackling a really fascinating, kind of hidden friction point in modern business. We're exploring this massive gap between how corporate ecosystems actually operate out there in the real world and how traditional data protection laws expect them to operate. It's basically a collision of corporate reality and legal theory, and we're going to untangle the whole shebang together.
Think about it. The last time you needed a doctor or maybe you were booking a hotel room, if you were heading to a major hospital network, you probably just said something like, "I'm going to Apollo." You absolutely didn't say, "I am going to Apollo Hospitals Enterprise Limited, a legally distinct subsidiary operating under a specific regional joint venture," right? No way, you just named the brand. And honestly, this simple, relatable statement is exactly where our legal headache begins. Because here's the thing. The reality of how we interact with major brands is rooted in one fundamental truth. The trust exists completely with the brand, not the corporate structure. As consumers, we expect a totally unified, seamless experience, and we're entirely unaware of the incredibly complex web of independent legal entities operating behind the scenes to make it happen. But the law? Well, the law sees every single one of those distinct entities. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to quickly trace this journey from the modern business illusion straight into the governance challenge it creates. Then we'll introduce a solution, the Super Fiduciary, see layered accountability in action, and finally, look at how this applies way beyond just the healthcare industry.
Section 1. The Modern Business Illusion. So look at India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act, or the DPDPA. It's a great principle-based piece of legislation, for sure. But it envisions this very classical, straightforward model. One company, one business, one customer. One entity collects your data, processes it, and takes the fall if something goes wrong. However, the digital economy actually relies on highly fragmented legal networks to deliver what merely feels like a unified customer experience.
Just think about how massive and varied a single brand's footprint can be. Sticking with the Apollo example, the brand encompasses wholly owned hospitals, managed hospitals, joint ventures, franchises, diagnostic centers, pharmacies, and all those digital health apps. To the Companies Act, this is dozens, maybe even hundreds of separate organizations. But to the patient, it's just Apollo.
Which brings us to Section 2, the governance challenge.
So picture this highly expected, everyday scenario. First, a patient is treated at Hospital A. Months later, they visit Hospital B. Same brand, totally different city. And then, the new doctor seamlessly pulls up their earlier medical records. Now, clinically, this continuity is fantastic, but legally, it's a total maze. Because it immediately sparks this question. Which hospital is actually the data fiduciary here? Who legally determines the purpose and means of processing that data? Is it Hospital A, Hospital B, or maybe the central cloud platform holding the records? And wait, it gets messier. Which entity obtained the original consent? Which entity actually authorized the sharing of data between these two legally distinct hospitals? And who do you even go to if you want your records corrected? And ultimately, capping off all this operational tension, who becomes accountable if the data is disclosed improperly? When your data is handled across a sprawling corporate network, figuring out who holds the ultimate risk and responsibility in the event of a breach is frankly incredibly difficult.
As our source material perfectly summarizes, distributed processing means distributed responsibility. Between centralized billing, remote AI analyzing radiology images, and enterprise cloud platforms, data is literally everywhere. The traditional, rigid statutory definitions of just a data fiduciary and a data processor simply break down when you try to assign accountability in this kind of web.
So what's the fix? Section 3. Enter the Super Fiduciary.
When you analyze these massive ecosystems, there's almost always a missing governance layer. There's this overarching organization that doesn't directly treat patients or sell retail goods, but they own the brand. They establish the cybersecurity architecture. They define AI governance and run the centralized digital platforms. Basically, they exercise immense influence over how personal data is handled across the entire network.
So the crucial point is, the Data Governance and Protection Standard of India, the DGPSI, identifies this overarching layer as the Super Data Fiduciary. Now, I want to be very clear here. This is a strategic governance designation. It is not a new legal category rewriting statutory law. It doesn't let the individual hospitals off the hook. It simply provides a framework for enterprise-level accountability whenever autonomous entities operate under a common identity.
Section 4. Layered accountability in action.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the system works in practice. It splits responsibilities into two distinct layers. On the operational side, you have the individual hospitals handling day-to-day statutory compliance.
actually getting the consent, protecting data locally, reporting breaches. But on the strategic side, the Super Data Fiduciary designs the common consent architecture, sets the enterprise cybersecurity standards, and establishes AI governance. They complement each other perfectly.
And let's not forget why this matters so deeply, particularly in healthcare. In healthcare, data is life, literally. This isn't just about opting out of marketing emails. This is clinical information supporting live diagnosis, emergency intervention, and patient safety. Ensuring absolute clarity on data governance across a hospital network isn't just a legal checkbox, it is a critical component of care.
Section 5. Beyond the healthcare industry.
Because this exact same governance challenge, it exists everywhere. Think about hospitality. International hotel brands are a huge mix of owned properties, franchises, and centralized loyalty databases. Retail relies on e-commerce platforms and franchised outlets. Education has autonomous colleges under one university system, financial services, aviation, tech platforms. In all of these, consumers trust the unified brand over the fractured legal entities, making the Super Data Fiduciary model a universal necessity.
The reality is, the law evolves way slower than technology and business structures. We can't just sit around waiting for parliamentary amendments every time a new organizational model pops up. That's why these sectoral DGPSI frameworks act as laboratories of governance. They give us immediate, practical compliance mechanisms that respect current laws while addressing operational realities right now.
Ultimately, layered accountability through a Super Data Fiduciary achieves a really critical balance. It preserves the strict statutory autonomy of individual businesses, while finally honoring what the consumer actually expects. It aligns the rigid letter of the law with the unified trust we naturally place in the brands we choose.
So, I'll leave you with this to reflect on. As business models become increasingly interconnected and AI platforms centralize data more than ever, is your organization actually ready for true enterprise-wide data accountability? Take a look at your own corporate structures or the brands you trust with your data and ask yourself who is really holding the reins. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking great questions, and I'll catch you next time.